Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. I've heard that there's been a little bit of confusion about how Grafdigger's cage works recently, so I thought in this episode I'd try and clear up some of how it works with a couple of really common interactions. So let's take a look at this first situation. Amy is going to play Indomitable Creativity while Nick controls a Grafdigger's cage. What happens? Okay, so there's really only one thing that Indomitable Creativity does that Grafdigger's Cage could potentially interact with. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through how everything works step by step. I'm just going to cut straight to the money shot, where the Indomitable Creativity puts the card that you hit from your library onto the battlefield. And, well, actually, that's not quite exactly how it works. See, it turns out that if you read the Indomitable Creativity very carefully, what you'll see is that you actually don't go straight from the library onto the battlefield. What you actually do is you reveal cards until you hit one, and then you exile that card. And then, after we're done with that process, all of the cards that you exiled get put onto the battlefield at the same time. And if I was going to guess, I would say that probably the reason why it's worded this way is because, based on how it actually is worded, all of the things that get hit all enter the battlefield at the exact same time. Whereas if you were going to reveal until you hit and then put it onto the battlefield and then reveal until you hit again and then put that onto the battlefield, well, then there would actually be a sequence where they enter the battlefield in a specific order. And that could lead to some kind of non-intuitive interactions if the creatures that are getting put onto the battlefield have triggered abilities or continuous effects. So that's probably the reason why they did it. It's so that all of the cards enter the battlefield at the exact same time, which corresponds probably with how most people would expect that spell to work. Unfortunately, another consequence of this is that it definitely does not work the way most people would expect if you put a Grafdigger's Cage into the mix. So Grafdigger's Cage, you can see that it only cares about if a creature card would enter the battlefield from a graveyard or library. That is not what's happening with Indomitable Creativity. We're entering from the exile zone, which is A-OK. And so the answer to our question then is that the Indomitable Creativity will resolve entirely normally, and the fact that Grafdigger's Cage is in play will not affect it at all. Well, that was kind of weird. Maybe there's another modern deck that has something that the Grafdigger's Cage could stop a little bit better. Let's see. Ooh, here's a good one. Okay, so Nick still has a Grafdigger's Cage out, but this time Amy is going to play a Shardless agent, and she's going to Cascade right into a Living End. Let's see how that is going to work. Okay, so logically, this definitely should get stopped, right? Well, let's take a look at how the Cascade mechanic functions first of all. And we'll notice that we are going to have a similar sort of situation with what we saw in the Indomitable Creativity example earlier. Grafdigger's Cage says that we can't cast spells from our graveyard or our library, but it doesn't have any problem with casting a spell from the exile zone. And wouldn't you know it, that's what Cascade actually has you do. You exile cards until you get one that hits, and then you get to cast that card that you hit from the exile zone. And again, there's no problem with doing that, so that part of the Cascade mechanic works entirely normally. And everything is going to work out exactly the way that it would even if there was no Grafdigger's Cage in play. But then, well, hey, come on. Let's take a look at this card Living End, and surely the Grafdigger's Cage should stop that, right? But again, we'll see the exact same problem is going to pop up. What you actually do when you're resolving the Living End would be to exile all the cards out of all of the graveyards, then sacrifice all of the creatures that are in play, then you're going to return the cards that were exiled onto the battlefield. And hey, again, there's absolutely no problem at all with putting a creature card onto the battlefield from the exile zone. And so that means that the Grafdigger's Cage is going to do absolutely nothing at all against the Living End either. Pretty sad, right? As a judge, I've had to explain this interaction to quite a few players over the years, and it always hurts a little bit inside having to tell someone that their interaction does not work at all the way that they expected that it should. It's pretty counterintuitive because, hey, Grafdigger's Cage hoses every other graveyard deck, why not this one? But it turns out that based on the way that the card is worded and the exact stuff that the cards you're trying to stop do, well, it just kind of slips through the cracks. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.